Okay.
Here.
Well, let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. Julie, would you take roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili, Mr. Dance,
Here.
and Ms. Goodman.
Here.
All right, all set.
Okay, moving on. The agenda, I think we have to make an adjustment to the agenda because we don't have the September 4th, 2020 special meeting minutes in there.
Oh,
Is that-
yes.
Do we have to do that?
Yeah, we'll put that on there.
Okay.
Motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, do I hear a second on that? Well, I'll second it.
We're actually just, we need a motion to amend the agenda to include that right now, correct?
Yes.
Motion will be to amend the agenda for that.
Okay. And who seconded?
Support.
Okay. Do we want a roll call?
Yes, please.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, has everybody had a chance to review the August 17, 2020 regular meeting minutes? And any comments, changes? They look fairly straightforward to me, and most of everything that I remember we talked about from my notes. Do I hear a motion to approve as presented? The August 17, 2020 regular meeting minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Support. Phil is supporting, seconding.
All right, I'll start the roll call. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman. Ms. Goodman?
I'm here. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergstrom.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the September 4th, 2020 special meeting minutes. I presume everybody's gotten a copy of that. Reading through that, it looks pretty much what we all talked about in that special meeting. Given Barry the okay to go ahead and sign off for the FOZ investigation. Do I hear an approval or to approve the September 4th, 2020 special meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes. Mark Bergstrom.
Okay, I'll second it.
All right, Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
and Mr. Suda.
Yes. Okay, moving on to the August 2020 accounts payable report. I presume everybody's gotten a copy of that, had a chance to review it. Any comments, questions? as we
It
move
is
forward?
E1.
Just
Say
a
again?
second.
It says inspection training, $6,000. I was just curious what E1 was.
Barry, I believe that was firefighting, wasn't it?
So first I just want to make, Susan apologizes for not being on the call. She had a doctor's appointment or for a family member in Traverse City that conflicted. She was going to try to dial in, but apparently was unable to. So to answer that question, E1 is the company that provided us with the testing apparatus for foam on our fire truck. It was something that we had installed back in March, I believe. And there were two parts to that invoice with E1. The first, which was back in March, was for the equipment, and that was paid for under one grant. And then the second part of it was the installation and training, and that was paid for under a different grant. This is that second piece of the completed installation of that equipment.
Barry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wonder what it was.
Yeah, I thought it was that, but I'm glad Barry answered it, helped us out. Any other questions, comments by the board? If not,
Well,
could
when
I
I
have-
look at the, when I look at the, it says trail balance, anyway, it's the second page, Barry, and it's in red in parentheses. Are we short 119,000?
So you'll see those two accounts there. So we currently have in one account 122,000 and in another account a negative 119,000. Susan is actually going through the process of transferring out of the PFC account into our general cash account, most of those monies. The balance in that PFC account should closely track the amount that we basically have listed as in the PFC account. But for a variety of reasons, the account was actually never kept up to date with basically the accounting. So she's going through, she was asking me for some documentation on some invoices from a year ago so that she can basically reconcile that. So yes, it is a shortfall, but it's really more, it's in one account and not in another account.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. That was in part B. Could we have a request to go ahead and approve the August 2020 accounts payable, Part A on the Treasurer's report?
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
and Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the second part, which is the revenue and expenses. And now, Jeff, the trial balance sheet, you've already asked a question, and sounds like Barry gave us a satisfactory answer. Is there any more comments, questions on the revenue and expenses sheets? And
What
trial
do-
balance?
What do we have available from the PFC account right now?
That is a good question, and I don't have the answer to that. Because that's part of when Susan, and she's since we're approaching the end of the fiscal year, she's really working to get everything kind of straightened out so that next year can start off properly. Going forward, we really should be able to answer that question by just looking at on the trial balance, that PFC account number. But because funds haven't been transferred around, that's not currently accurate. And I'm just noticing that she stopped including kind of the running total that we have been accustomed to seeing. I don't really have an answer for that.
Well, no, you do, Barry. You do, because she's working on it. I
She is
accept it.
definitely working on it, yes.
Yeah. The only thing about that is that's sort of our flexible money. That's sort of our flexible funds. So,
Right. And, but my recollection is either last month, and I could probably pull up the minutes of last month to see, we didn't have that much in that account. Yeah, actually, as of last month, it said $16,000. So there isn't a lot in that account right now. But one thing I will add is that over the course of the last month, I've submitted grant reimbursements for about $94,000.
oh, wow.
And I think some of that revenue has come in. I think about 10 or 20,000 of that 90-some thousand has come in, but the bulk of it has not yet. So, and again, the goal is to, as of the end of the fiscal year, really to get caught up on some of those grant reimbursements and the PFC accounts, so that, you know, as we go into next year, everything will be much more straightforward. And it will also help that next year, because we're starting as of October 1st under standard essential air service, the pass-through of the airline grants won't be happening on our books. So our, you know, financials will be much more straightforward going forward.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, also attached to our finance reports was the Orchard Beach Aviation Fuel Office rent numbers, as well as fuel pumping sales. Looks like we're holding in there pretty good yet. Okay, no further questions. Could I have a motion to approve the August 2020 financial statement, revenue, expenses, trial balance sheets?
I'll make that
Yeah.
motion.
I'll support it, Karen.
Okay. Was somebody else making a comment there? Okay. Julia, roll call, please.
Yep, Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
and Mr. Dantz.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to committee reports, discussions. To my knowledge, there was no executive committee meeting in this past month. The budget committee didn't meet in person. We did have correspondence email-wise and so on to adjust the budget or suggest some budget adjustments because of the $6,000 shortfall that was coming from the transfer in from the general fund from the county. Since Andrew's not here, I'll go ahead and fill in. And Barry, if I'm not completely correct on what I'm saying, jump in. First off, Barry did a little digging and came up with an extra $3,500 for revenue, fuel sales, based on our deal with Cape Air and with Cape Air coming on board. And then in that case, all we had to do was offset $2,500. And so we ended up offsetting $500 from miscellaneous supplies and another $2,000 for equipment. And that ended up balancing the revenue with the costs and so on, coming down to $477,929 on both sides. I believe that's about it, right, Barry?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions, comments by the board? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the adjusted budget as presented for the coming 2020-21 year, which starts October 1st. Do I hear a motion for that?
I'll make that motion, Mark Bergstrom, to approve it.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
It's Karen. I'll second it.
Thank you, Karen. Julie, roll call, please.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
and Mr. Ha.
Yes. Okay, also finishing up with committee reports discussion, there was no capital projects committee during this past month. So that moves us down to the airport director's report. Barry, it's yours.
Okay. That up. Okay. So I put something under the airport incidents and accidents. Normally that's kind of meant to be reserved for airplane type incidents or accidents, but this seemed to kind of fit in the category. So we were doing a fence inspection, a fence line inspection, which is one of the things we're periodically required to do for both safety and security reasons. And we discovered probably about a 50 to 75 feet of fence on the south side of the airport had been damaged. So we're trying to get some quotes out to get that fixed. It looks like what happened was that when someone was mowing along the fence line, that they basically clipped it a little bit. It's basically 5 poles in a row, 5 fence posts in a row, where damage occurred. Don't know how, when, who that happened, but we got to get it fixed. So
Was that, did it look like it was on our side or their side?
I would.
The other side.
It's hard to tell actually, but I'm going to guess it was on our side because
Okay.
I mean it's possible because the only thing that should be the only vehicles that should be on the outside in that area would be city vehicles heading to their water well.
Okay.
It would be highly unlikely, but it's really presented us kind of a mystery as to what happened there. And so
Well, we do have a pretty wide mower out here, so it's kind of hard to be watching all 4 corners at once.
right, but yes.
Is anybody actually mowing on the outside? I mean, has anybody ever?
We do, because if you don't, then brush grows up and then the city won't be able to access their access gate. So, but we haven't done any mowing outside this year, but we have done inside.
Is that city property or airport property on the other side of the fence?
It is all airport property.
Okay, all right.
The city has their well and their pump house on airport property.
Okay, Barry,
So,
speaking for myself, continue the direction you're going.
So overall activity at the airport has remained seasonally normal, if not a little bit higher than normal. Post Labor Day, things do slow down, but there's still been a good amount of general aviation traffic and sightseeing flights. Other activity though, I mean, the commercial airline service, that is, down as it is across the country, but not, any more so than would be typical. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I guess the next slide I have is airfares. So I really wanted to kind of stretch this just because it might be the only time we'll ever be in a position to do this. But the average fare on Cape Air with either connections on United or American for next month, for the dates we looked at, out of Manistee was 180, just shy of $184. That same average out of Grand Rapids was 176. So we were within $8 of Grand Rapids. I kind of wanted to push the numbers a little bit because this does not include potential connections, and I say that with a kind of air quotes, on low fare carriers out of Chicago, like Frontier or Spirit. If you actually included potential options to fly on those. Now, the reason I didn't include them is it's kind of like the situation we have in Midway where you have to self-transfer your bags because they're, independent airlines and there aren't agreements. But if you were willing to do that, that would have brought our average down another $10. So we would have been, if you included those, cheaper on average than Grand Rapids in this period, which probably hasn't happened maybe since, maybe it happened during Frontier days, but certainly hasn't happened in reasonable memory. So, it really is speaking well to what capabilities Cape Air has with their partners to providing airfares that are competitive, if not very competitive, with our neighboring airports.
So Larry, what you're saying, I'm a little confused. This October stuff you're showing us right here, that's based on Cape Air's input now, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Is that a round trip or just one way to Boston?
That's round trip.
Oh, wow.
Right now, out of Chicago on American and United, you can get round trip tickets to a lot of destinations for under $100 across the country.
How about Hawaii?
Hawaii's not quite that cheap, and if you go to Hawaii, you've got 14-day quarantine. So, plan to stay in Hawaii for a long time if you want to go there right now.
So Mark, keep that in mind for January.
There we go.
And then, so that as is typical, the top half of this page shows kind of just the airfares. And then if you include parking, because our parking is free and our neighboring airports are not, that clearly pushes the advantage into our favor for pretty much every route, with just a handful of exceptions on direct flights on Frontier out of Grand Rapids. So, again, overall, things are looking really good. Now we're still in the midst of the pandemic, and nothing about pricing in the airlines is really normal right now. So there's no, real indication whether this is, going to last or not, but it certainly is good news for the time being. Looking at our passenger numbers for last month. Last month we did 429 total passengers as compared to 1,422 for last year. I forget the percentage on that, but it's either 30 or 33%. Again, which is pretty typical of national averages across the nation as to passenger numbers versus prior year. So, you know, we're in line. I would hope we'd be better than the national average, but under, you know, the current carrier, we were not. We were a little bit better in July than the national average, partly just because there's so much demand around the 4th of July that normally we're turning people away, and this year we weren't, but we were still pretty close to full on our flights around the 4th of July. So that's good. Also good, you know, public charters, if they had been doing what they are doing now throughout the last 2 years of their contract, they might have actually had a chance. There were only 2 flights that were delayed in the month, no cancellations. One delay was an hour and the other one was 15 minutes. They've really been performing very good with both the 1900 and the jet operating this summer. But at this point, it doesn't matter, but they are going out on with providing quality service.
That's good.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
On either the passenger numbers, airline performance, or the airfares?
Not for me.
Okay, then I will move on. So I'm going to keep mentioning this until it becomes clearly a non-issue. But under current rules, we potentially are in jeopardy of losing our EAS eligibility if we do not bring our per passenger subsidy down to under $1,000. Or Congress gives a waiver on that this year. Given the fact that Washington seems to be at gridlock, and I suspect that will be the case at least probably until the lame duck session after the election. I'm not really expecting any movement on this at the Washington level. So on our side, if we can average, I'd say 350 passengers a month for September, October, November, December, it becomes a non-issue. And I'm cautiously optimistic that that should not be a problem unless we go into another lockdown or something that's going to significantly impact passengers for sometime the rest of the calendar year. So, you know, it's the update. I'm feeling better about it, just seeing how passenger numbers are looking, especially with Cape Air. But you know, until we get to December 31st, lots of things could happen. No update on the fuel system monitor. I do have new news, actually, as of this morning, on the former Ted Aaron's hangar that the airport has basically taken over ownership of as of August 1st. Couple, you know, touch points on this are that Cape Air will be using it this winter. They're going to be the sole tenant this winter. They're planning now on having 2 aircraft based in Manistee. The Technam, which they will be operating service with, as well as a spare aircraft, one of their older Cessnas. So they're really looking at having backup available here to really make sure that their service really operates without issues. So, we've got someone. I'm still working with Cape Air on contracts and lease rates for that hangar. Had kind of hoped, but realistically wasn't expecting to get them done by this meeting. But we'll have to act on those at some future point. I'm still continuing discussions with both Cadillac Aircraft Service and Cape Air about the goal we have of having both tenants share the hangar use in the future under some mutually beneficial arrangements so that we can begin the process of bringing a maintenance facility here to the airport. So that's an ongoing discussion. What's new today is last week, I reached out to our consulting firm, Prina Newhoff, and basically asked for any recommendations they had on firms that could look at the hangar door. Obviously, the hangar door has been this kind of unknown. We've had this vague report of there being issues, which, we have a, responsibility to investigate now that we own it, certainly from a safety perspective. But trying to find someone that would give us an unbiased opinion was my concern, because my suspicions have been that this originated with something that wasn't necessarily an unbiased opinion, and there were maybe other motivations to sell a new door as opposed to provide the most accurate information. So after I reached out to Prina Newhoff, they put me in touch with the airport manager in Frankfurt, and I chatted with him last weekend on Saturday, and he gave me contact information for this company called Powerlift Doors. They're out of somewhere southwest Michigan. I don't know exactly where right now. And they've done a number of door repairs, inspections at the Frankfurt airport, and came highly recommended from the Frankfurt airport manager. And I was very pointed in my conversations with him about, well, Powerlift Doors, it sounds like they sell doors. Are they really going to, provide that unbiased evaluation? And he said, they've worked on approximately 12 doors, different doors up at Frankfurt, and never once has that been something they've suggested as to replacing the door. So with that, I felt really confident to reach out to them. Kind of in parallel, they were actually trying to reach out to me. I had a good conversation with them late last week, and they were here this morning kind of giving an initial visual inspection. One of the things that's come out of my conversation with them is they're kind of filling a niche that exists in this part of the state where there really is no firm who specializes in maintenance of aircraft hangar doors. So they're seeing a need across a lot of different airports. So that's kind of almost like a new business line that they are working on, in addition to what they originally, were about, which was, selling doors and doing that kind of work. So the guy who was their principal for doing basically inspections and maintenance type activities was here this morning, and his basic, multiple times he said, the door looks good, the door looks fine, doesn't look like there's really any significant problem with the door, which really made me feel much better, because that's, obviously not where we had been. They're going to put together 2 quotes for us. One which will be basically to do routine maintenance on door, greasing, tightening cables, inspecting cables. looking at the electrical of the door and really kind of giving it a maintenance that it's probably never had in the 20 years that that door's been in existence. And then we also know that one of the things is that there's a top seal on the door that needs to be replaced because currently you can see daylight through, and it's what's allowing pigeons to basically roost and nest inside the hangar. We've, over the last couple of weeks, been going through and power washing all of the hangars that have pigeon issues and trying to clean things up while we're also trying to mitigate our pigeon problems. So I asked him to put those together into two different things. Obviously, the maintenance and the inspection in the detail needs to be done. The replacement of the seal is something that definitely needs to be done, but is less time critical than the former, because Cape Air wants to begin using the hangar when they start service on October 1st. So that's, well, I consider all of that good news, and we'll see where it goes. I'm anticipating that the maintenance quote will be well within my spending authority under the maintenance budget. The other quote might be a little bit more and might require board approval, but until I get those, I won't know for sure. Are there any questions on this topic?
Barry, what kind of compensation is the airport service going to receive from Cape Air?
That's to be determined. I really don't know what market rate is for that type of hangar, and I need to reach out to a couple other airports and kind of get something that's a kind of market rate number on that. My guess is about $1,000 a month, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. And then you, in terms of this maintenance business for airport services, do you have someone in mind at this point that might be interested in providing that service? And if so, where would they be housed?
So the answer is yes, and it's the company's currently called Cadillac Aircraft Maintenance, and I've talked a little bit about them before in previous meetings. They're looking at moving their seaplane maintenance over to here, and they would want to be using this same hangar. And Cape Air is, the hangar theoretically is big enough to allow winter storage for what Cadillac aircraft would need, as well as housing Cape Air's aircraft in the winter as well. So we believe they can coexist. How we would structure such an arrangement, it could be similar to what we've done with Mr. Shively and the hangar that he has taken over, and that we transfer ownership back under certain conditions to that entity, and they then sublease to Cape Air, or it could be a more straight normal rental lease on it. There are lots of different options to be discussed. So that's some of the things that we're starting to talk about.
Thank you.
Is the roof, has the roof ever been checked in Aaron's hangar? I think there may be a possibility of there being a leak in there. Has that been investigated?
It has not, no.
Okay. I know when we were in it some time ago, there was water on the floor that did somewhat look like it may have come from the roof as opposed to any other place.
Okay. Anything else?
One thing you were talking about the aircraft that Cape Air is going to be using a tech ham or something you mentioned.
Yep.
I think last time you mentioned they were having some problems
Oh.
getting it
Yes.
qualified or
Certified.
certified.
There was a modification made to the aircraft by the manufacturer, and the FAA needed to sign off on that change, and there was a delay. That all was resolved about 2 weeks ago, so they've been flying again in service. for the-
Okay, good. Yeah, because the last time you talked about it, you weren't sure as to where they were gonna go and how long the red tape would take to get through and all that stuff.
Yep.
Good,
Forgot about that, and thank you for
no
reminding.
problem. No problem.
Okay, so looking at projects, so these are the two projects that are scheduled for this fiscal year, and obviously we're 2 weeks left in this fiscal year, and we approved the grant and associated documents for the PFAS testing at the special meeting earlier this month. And we have before us today some of the required documents for the airport ALP update. It's lovely how bureaucracy, the pace that bureaucracy moves at. These are this year's projects, and we're just really getting the paperwork approved for them at the end of the year. Fortunately, we've got a few years to spend that money, but it makes planning challenging. On the agenda and was sent out yesterday is the contract with Prina Newhoff, so I won't really go into that more now. I'll wait till that item on the agenda later. But that's kind of the status of upcoming projects, and we are scheduled to meet with the state in October, and I don't remember the exact date, where the state will basically review our plans for 2021 fiscal year projects. And I'll start, once that gets approved by the state, basically kind of keeping you up to date with where we are with 2021 projects. Any questions on either of those right now? And again, the first one will be touched on in more detail a little bit later. We're down to 10 days left of service with North Country Sky. As I kind of touched on earlier, everything's actually been operating really smoothly. After Labor Day, they shifted back to 1 flight a day, 7 days a week, which was as planned. And the loads have been kind of following that national average, around 1/3 of normal. Although for this month, the comparisons between this month, this year, and last year are odd, because last year the airport was closed for 10 days because we were planning on doing our runway resurfacing, and then the labor issues prevented that from happening, but the airline had already canceled all the flights. So it's kind of an easy comparison this September to last September. So we're doing better than the 1/3, but if you go back 2 years, it's about that 1/3. So yeah, we ended August at 30% of last year's numbers. September, again, should be at 65% of the prior year. And again, that's because of being closed a chunk of last September. And, again, we're right now nationally about 33%, at least that's what I've seen over the last week. Those national numbers are tending up, but at a really, really slow pace. So it's not nearly as bouncing back as fast as everyone was hoping in the aviation industry. Looking forward to 10 days from now when we start Cape Air service. So we've been working a lot with Cape Air. They've had people here multiple times now, visiting, interviewing, hiring, planning, all sorts of things. I've got like probably about a dozen different people at Cape Air that I'm working with. It's been actually keeping me pretty busy, trying to coordinate all of their needs. The American Airlines code share is working well, and further good news is United Airlines has corrected or resolved their pricing issue where they weren't basically publishing any reasonable fares that combined with Cape Air. That's been addressed. And if we're looking at the airfare numbers, right now, United is actually priced lower than American on a good number of routes. So we've kind of in the last 10 days changed some of our plans because with United being where they were, we weren't really going to push them much on our website and really kind of in how we talked about Cape Air partners, because it doesn't make sense to mention a partner and then someone goes and looks and the price is $1,000 or more for something. But since that's been resolved, we're kind of promoting American and United pretty much as equals. I'll touch on that in a second about our new website. Right now, sales are looking good on Cape Air. In fact, last week, total sales, and this is a combination of what was sold on North Country Sky as well as Cape Air. So the total of the two sold last week was 136 seats, and that compares to the same week last year of 115. So right now we're trending equal, if not slightly up from a year ago. And if you think about that in the context of being down, to a third or being down 2/3 overall, where we've been seeing things track this summer, that really means that Cape Air's service is being very well received, that we're being able to meet last year's booking numbers as opposed to being only a third of last year's booking numbers. So I'm really encouraged by that. And also what I'm very happy with is that, again, I'm gonna have to wind this back a little bit. So here at the airport, we keep finding ourselves saying, oh, wow, we're working with a real airline. Oh, wow, we're working with a real airline. Just as the amount of equipment that's been showing up and, just everything they're doing is very much like it was when Frontier came in. They're going to have a team here for a week to 10 days at service start to make sure that everything goes well. They're doing everything the way it should be done to provide a really quality start of service.
Good.
Having said that, because they are a real airline and are, accustomed to operating that way, there are some requests that I've had from them that I kind of assumed they would say, yeah, we're probably not going to be in a position to do that. And one of them is that we've been in a position the last 8 years where we've had access to pretty much all of the data from the airline, number of seats sold per day, number of bookings on any given day out in the future, total revenue being booked by the airline, all of that data. I've got spreadsheets that now go back 8 years and kind of track all of that. So I can kind of see trends over time, trends during the seasonality trends as to, what time of the year, when do people start buying for summer in the spring? All of that, I've got that historic data, and it's really great to have, and it's actually been helpful to Cape Air and doing some of their planning. But my assumption is that they wouldn't be in a position to share that with us as an airport. But I'm really happy to say that they recognize us as being kind of in a different position and have really been very open in sharing all of that data with us. I started receiving it about a week ago, which is why I can tell you how many seats we sold last week, because normally with any other partner, I'd probably not be in a position to be able to tell you that. So they're a real airline, but yet they're small enough that they are really willing to work with us in ways that, you know, are kind of unique. So I'm very, very pleased.
We picked a
Barry,
good one.
Yes, I think we did. Barry, one question, you know, you're talking about Cape Air coming in with their stuff and all that stuff and so on. I'm just thinking, public charter, do they have stuff they're gonna have to take out of here now, or is there gonna be much of a removal on their end or anything?
Not really. The biggest piece of equipment they have is their de-icing unit, and actually Cape Air is purchasing that from public charters.
Wow.
They do have a tug here, a GPU. There's probably one truckload of equipment that will need to get hauled out, but not necessarily a lot.
Okay, there's a curiosity question there.
I do know that their last day of operation, which is the 30th, Jim Gallagher, Public Charter's head, is booked on that flight. So I think he's coming in to kind of, you know, say farewell to everybody here. So I
That's
think
good.
yeah,
That's good.
it'll be a nice gesture on their part, and
Right, exactly.
we'll also
Exactly.
be based on any of those type of issues at that time. So,
Good.
any other questions on that? So kind of talking on the marketing side, and we've been focusing a lot on this, although not necessarily a lot is visible yet. And it's kind of a balancing act. I mean, we do really want to allow public charters, North Country Sky, the, you know, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but, you know, they're providing service through the end of this month. So we don't want to like clear off the slate and make them be non-existent too much before the end of their service. But at the same time, there's a lot of planning in making sure that we're ready to go October 1st. So a lot has been happening on the marketing side. We did really seesaw marketing efforts of North Country Sky after Labor Day. Last Thursday night, the new flymanistee.com website launched. And actually, I'm going to demo that for everybody because there's a couple things I really want to show people. So let me.
Has Cape Air worked with you on that, Barry?
I mean, we've run everything by them because we don't want to use their branding and their messaging in any way that would run counter to how they would want to see things. So yes, we're working with them. Okay. Let's see. It's just desktop. Browser. Tab. So until last Thursday, North Country Sky was front and center for booking on the webpage. That now switched out. So really the website is really Cape Air centric. You'll see over here where I kind of was talking earlier about that concept of American and United kind of being kind of equal partners on that. So you know, we've got the headline of Cape Air, but underneath it, the American and United taglines. We still do provide the option to book North Country flights for the next 10 days. But again, it's kind of pushed down in the priority of the website. what I really wanted to show you though is, so the capabilities on the website to book. So if I just, I'm saying I want to fly from Manistee to Chicago, an October date, since they don't, Cape Air doesn't fly until October. This is now going to basically hand us off to Cape Air's website with that information plugged in. So I had chosen Monday the 12th, returning Monday the 19th. You'll see that on those days, $49 is the cheapest fare, which means the $39 seats on those Mondays have been sold out, because that's what the fares are starting at, is $39 right now. I kind of want to, no, actually, I think it's, yeah. I'm going to show you something just because it's not part of my narrative here, but it's at the same time still interesting. I'm going to go back to the first part of October. So Friday, I did it not. Friday the 2nd, you'll see we have our first sold out flights on Cape Air, which is good.
Yep.
So anyway, this is kind of that booking flow if you're flying between Manistee and Chicago, which is really all we've been able to do for the last few years. But because we now have connecting service on American United, if I say I want to fly from Manistee to Boston, and again, some dates in October. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to go to Cape Air's website because they don't show it. So instead, we're basically going to a different search engine, in this case, Google Flights, and we'll see that Cape Air American has a departure connecting on American, round trip 189. If you want a bad connection with an overnight layover, you can shave another $20 off of that. So integrated within our website is now the ability to kind of find reasonably good fares, whether it's on United or American or potentially, other carriers. It could be Alaska if I were searching Seattle, JetBlue if we're searching New York. So we're really trying to create the functionality on our website because we want people basically starting their booking process on our website. Because depending on where you go otherwise, if you just went to American, you might miss the fact that United had a cheaper fare or vice versa. So we don't necessarily want to push people just to American or United's websites. We really want to give them kind of this aggregation of lowest fares such that they're getting the best deal so that we can compete with our neighboring airports. So just kind of wanted to show you that.
I see in there, it gives you the total time from Manistee here all the way to Boston.
Yep.
In your second column there.
Yep.
Wow, quite nice.
At this point, I don't really know how many people are booking connecting fares because it's not been something people have been able to do for the last 8 years. But clearly this is where our marketing will be pushing people, and that messaging as it comes online will be showing and directing people to those new capabilities. Okay, let me go back to my report. So all of that has been happening around the website launch. A couple interesting comments. And again, because we've been in a position where we've essentially been the airline for the last 8 years, and that's, myself, Brandon Jensen, our marketing, approach this very differently than Cape Air's typical essential air service airport. A lot of airports don't even really have websites. They don't do any marketing. These are all things that we've been doing, and really we've built up a good understanding of who our customers are and what they need. When we've been showing Cape Air some of these things that we're doing, there have been a couple interesting comments. One comment was from Cape Air's now head of marketing. She was the regional person, but because they've had a vacancy, she's actually now taking over marketing for all of Cape Air. She, after seeing what Right Side Design and Brandon Jensen do and the quality of it, she's asked them to basically provide bids because she wants to use them for more stuff. And number two was a comment also from her late last week that said, oh, we want to integrate this type of functionality that I just showed you into all of our EAS markets, because that's really what people need. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that they're seeing value in what we are adding on top of the marketing they already do. This item, the next item here is we have a plan in place where basically every item within the airport, and in one case outside the airport, but on airport property, every item that has a reference to North Country Sky, those references will all be replaced either on the 30th or 31st of October. Really going to try to do a complete switchover such that when someone comes in on October 1st, there won't be a single reference to North Country Sky anymore, and it will, to the extent possible, look good for Cape Air starting service, like they belong here, that they've been here for a while. There are a couple signs where we're kind of doing some temporary things where we're kind of just pasting over some stuff as opposed to replacing the entire sign. But some of those other things will be rectified going forward. But we do have plans in place to all signage. We've got a display in the waiting area that's got some rotators on it that have some North Country Sky branding. Those are being updated. The sign that kind of shows the airline schedule is being updated. Signage, brochures. There's a billboard on the end of our T hangars that we've got a plan to get done. So basically, come end of next week, boom, everything should be Cape Air centric. We're holding bi-weekly meetings with Cape Air's marketing team to coordinate all of this. Cape Air's in the process of purchasing billboards, radio, and television airtime to kind of get their messaging out throughout kind of the next 3 months. They're kind of looking at really kind of a bigger splash, just kind of introducing them to our community and our region through those means. We, with our more limited marketing budget, are really focusing on the things we've been doing, digital advertising and email advertising. And really this week, we'll be starting to turn on some of these things. So again, we don't want to be marketing too far in advance, especially since people can't book until October 1st. And especially right now where a lot of booking happens very last minute just because people aren't booking far in advance because they're just, unsure of their plans until the last minute because of basically the pandemic environment that we're in. Something that everyone should be aware of is, even though October 1st is the introductory service, Cape Air's process for this is they treat that as kind of a soft launch. So we're not really doing a big invite out to the media. They really want to make sure that operationally things go smoothly that day, and they don't want to be distracted by interviews and cameras and that type of stuff. They plan then a few weeks after the start of service to then do a more formal media event with ribbon cutting. Stay tuned on a date for that. That date has not yet been picked. And we're trying
Is that gonna be put,
to do what we can do with current governor's executive orders for, limiting indoor people, getting into October where outdoors becomes less desirable. So we're trying to sort through how best we can do that event. Sorry, Jerry, I cut you off. You had a question?
I was just gonna say, I hear what you're saying and so on. I was just wondering if when you're gonna do this ribbon cutting, you're gonna put a little announcement in the paper or something like that?
Yes.
Possibly, or maybe,
That will be one of the media partners that we'll be reaching out to.
right, okay. Sounds good, sounds good. I didn't realize all this stuff had to be happening, but I guess now that you mention it, it has to be happening. The transition period.
Well, it's nice to
Right.
have a real airline again now too, so that's really worth a lot.
Any questions on Cape Air, new air service related?
I think you covered it pretty thoroughly, Barry.
I
At
got
least for me.
two other issues. One I've got labeled here, and one that I was reminded before the meeting to bring up. So, as I've mentioned in the past, the Cape Air has some loose connections with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They're trying to see if they can kind of generate some interest. So far, that has not been receptive. The last update I got basically said they've basically struck out kind of at the local and regional level. So they're going to try more of a top-down approach. So they're going to reach out to their contacts at corporate and see if they can kind of shake the trees that way. Because as has been discussed in the past, our rental car situation here is poor. And especially now that we have connectivity, if someone flies into our airport from somewhere else in the country or the world, once they get here, they need transportation. Without rental cars, we're basically limited to people who have someone here to pick them up, which kind of rules out people coming here from a travel and tourism perspective, because you're going somewhere to be a tourist, you're probably not going someplace that people already that can give you rides. So the limited cars we have, and over the last few years, that number has been dwindling, and the quality of those cars has been dwindling. I mean, a number of the vehicles now are well over 100,000 miles. Most of them are 10 years old or older. It's really embarrassing for my staff, who we've got an arrangement with Maori Leasing to basically man and kind of be the desk people for their rental cars. But it's really embarrassing when people have the issues they have and are shocked at the quality of the vehicles they're getting. But it's the only game in town. And I suspect that we will be seeing more of a need for rental cars with Cape Air service. In fact, I was just talking with someone this morning who they're flying in tomorrow on a private jet, and we have no cars available in Manistee for them. And they don't know what they're going to do with their crew and how the crew is going to get to their hotel, et cetera, et cetera. I pointed them in the direction of reaching out to the casino because the casino at least provides a shuttle. It's the only shuttle service that exists. But even other things like the taxi service in Manistee is very hit and miss. If you can schedule something ahead of time, you're okay, but last minute, just call them up and expect to get a cab. Probably not going to happen in Manistee. So we've got issues. Now, it dawned on me this past week that the airport has a set of rules and regulations, and the purpose of those rules and regulations is to set minimum standards for services conducted out of the airport. And I'm basically asking that the board basically look at revising its rules and regulations, in particular in this area, maybe trying to increase or set minimum quality standards for rental car service at the airport. And it's been about 10 years since those were looked at anyway, so it's probably time that they could have an overall review. But I think this issue could be something that could get addressed in a way that might nudge either the existing carrier or the existing firm who's providing rental cars to improve their game, or convince them that they should really leave the market and allow someone else to step in. Now, will someone else step in? That's, $64,000 question, but I think it's kind of been a crutch, and it's in some ways prevented entrepreneurs in the area from really going down this route because they'd be competing with an entrenched party. So that is a recommendation I have, request of the board that they would either create a committee to review this or assign this to an existing committee to really look at revising the rules and regulations for the airport. So that's kind of a long lead in. I'm hoping that there's maybe a little discussion on that.
I agree with you, Barry. I mean, it is discouraging that, just because you've got the corner market, that you can kind of put sub-quality out there. Nobody's holding them accountable to that, and they don't have to. And so we don't want any of our customers to kind of have that kind of situation. And again, it's about impressions. So, I come into a really nice looking airport and I go to my car and it's, not the best. I mean, when I travel, it's like, yeah, you have a tendency to want to have the best vehicle you can get while you're out and about. So if I come out there and it's, not that great a vehicle and it's kind of okay, right, it's just going to give me an impression on how things operate in this community. It's like, this can slide by. So I agree with you totally. Either, pick up your game or move over and let somebody else do it.
Thank you for expressing that viewpoint. That was in the back of my mind as a reason for all of this, but I didn't really verbalize that. So I'm glad you picked up on that. And I wholeheartedly agree that does represent our community in the types of services we provide people when they get here.
Yes, Mary, I hear you and I agree with you. And Karen, that was a good comment there. Yes, when I go to an airport and get off a plane and so on, rent a car, I want something that's nice and clean and ready to go. And it's not something that you're wondering where it came from. So yes, we're going to have to start looking at that. And I guess what I'm going to say is, at least for me, I'm going to have to dig out these rules and regs and things that you're talking about, Barry, and review them before I suggest which direction we might want to go. So I'm going to say that to everybody. Let's pull those out and take a look at it and go from there.
I will send out the current version to all board members in case you don't have them or don't know where they are.
That's
And
what I was
then,
hoping you'd say, Barry.
and then we can maybe continue the conversation next month.
Right.
We don't have any Uber service in our community, do we?
Please.
Not really. I mean, there's probably one or two people in the community that are technically Uber drivers. But again, unless you've got the app turned on and you're accepting rides, which, you know, a lot of people do this as kind of just a sideline, it's not something anyone can rely on.
We have what I'm going to call underground Ubers. I've run across those type
Oh.
people, but nothing official through Uber. So anyway,
Yeah.
but again, like Barry said, it's kind of hard to find those people when you're coming into the area looking for something like that. It's kind of like all by word of mouth.
It has to do with volume too, I guess. You know, if you don't,
Oh yeah.
you know, if you don't have enough renting cars being rented, it's hard to make that go. And Uber is, you know, again, it's based on how many rides you can provide. And I don't know, my experience with Uber, not in our community, but the rides that I got were just really nice cars, beautiful cars, new cars, and man, they're there in about 10 or 15 minutes. That was in New York
Excellent.
before everything went nuts.
Okay. Anything else, Barry?
Nope. Well, not on that topic. So then the one other thing that I was reminded about a little while ago is, in this case, we've talked about this, but it's been a few years. The newer T hangers that we have, the 4-unit T hangers that was built 2012-13 timeframe, they have individual electric meters on them. And what this really means is it's really good for consumers' energy because there's, you know, a $25 meter charge for each of those meters. And generally those hangers are using about $1 worth of electricity a month. Now, the way we've done this is that the tenants are responsible for paying those bills, but the meters are maintained in the airport's name. So as part of Susan's monthly invoicing for hangar rent, she basically tacks on the appropriate meter bill for that hangar. We charge $175 a month for those hangars, and then there's this $25 plus $1.50 to consumers. So generally, hangar tenants are paying, you know, a little over $200 a month total. We're getting $175. Consumers is getting $25. We've kind of internally been talking through some ideas of, would it make sense for us to maybe change that model? It actually could reduce Susan's workload by not having to keep track of some of this stuff, and potentially actually make us a little bit more money eventually by having just a single consumer's meter and then replacing out the 4 individual consumers' meters right now with just simpler devices that just kind of keep track of total usage, much like a meter does, but it's not a smart meter that's, you know, reporting wirelessly back to consumers. It's something we would own, such that we're paying one $25 fee a month, plus then maybe across the 4 years, $10 a month in usage, and that we then would increase our rent from $175 to maybe $190 or $195, and actually make a little bit more money at consumers' expense. Now, I hope that whole scenario made sense. I've talked about it so many times that it's like kind of just like obvious to me what I'm proposing here. But you know, Phil, do you have anything you want to chime in? Because you've been the kind of one that I've been brainstorming this with.
Phil, can you get down
Yeah, I think it's a great idea if we do go down to just the one utility meter, because then you just have the one charge, and then that could be divvied up among the hangar tenants. And then, as Barry said, you know, then you could raise the rent of the hangars, and it would be at the expense of the utility, but there would be money coming into the authority then because of the you know, the raised rent. But in effect, it would all average out to be about the same. I pay around average of around. I looked over my bills yesterday evening, and or looked over my checkbook, and my average is about $205 per month for the $175 rent, and then the rest goes to the utility. And that includes the $25 that they get for that meter. It would be, I think, a fairly easy thing to get a contractor to come here and have a look at that and give us a price, including meters. And it would not be anything that would require any, under the current rules, it would not require any engineering supervision or anything of that matter. A contractor could just simply get in contact with the utility and says, this is what we want to do, and they would schedule it. Nothing would really change other than there'd be one more meter out there, and 4 of them that are there right now would look a little different, but drive by, you wouldn't even notice it. And like I say, you could, the authority could make more money by increasing the rent of these hangars, and I think it'd be a win-win, really.
I mean, there would be an initial cost to the airport to do these changes. That would then offset on this monthly increase in rent that, you know, depending on how much it costs, could really be, you know, in a year or so, we would be in the positive on that. So there is some upfront, but.
Yes, correct. There would be some upfront for paying a contractor to do this. You're absolutely correct.
Barry, we're talking about 4 meters here, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I am thinking that I've got no problem with doing that. If the rest of the board says, Barry, put together a little scenario on this, put it on paper, present it to us, and if it sounds like it is to you, what you're presenting to us, I see no reason why not to approve it.
Well, I think we'd want to have a dollar figure that it would cost us.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Barry, put it together and present it to us. How about the other board members? Are you in agreement or disagreement with what I just kind of said?
I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Barry, does that sound reasonable or?
Yep, that's what I was really
Okay.
looking for, was a yay or nay to move forward or not. And
Well, you
obviously,
got a yay.
like this would require board approval, but I can
Okay, well,
put in the effort to give you a more firm proposal.
let's go ahead and give me a motion for what Barry's proposing. Somebody kind of piece that together, and then we'll take a roll call and,
Actually, at this
Give-
point, we
go
don't
ahead.
need a motion because you're just basically telling me to go investigate and come back with a proposal. So,
So you've got our permission, or my permission anyway, to go ahead and investigate and come back with a proposal.
Yep.
And, see where it actually comes out.
And if you want any help on that, Barry, let me know and I can probably,
I'm already going to tap you for some thoughts
yeah,
on it.
I can provide some insight for that.
Okay,
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
there you go. I agree with that. Whoever said that, was that Mark?
Yo,
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Barry, all set?
Yes, that is the end of my report.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. Old business, unfinished business, I'm not aware of any.
Correct.
Just- Okay. Now let's move on to new business. Barry, it's back to you on this new business.
Yeah, so here's the situation we find ourselves in. The contract with Prina Newhoff for the ALP update work is not something the board should approve until the board has the funding in place for that contract. The State Aeronautics Commission approved the grant for that work at their meeting last Thursday. We have not yet received the paperwork on it, so we can't, there's a chicken and egg issue here with how do we try to move forward without, taking another month, because some of this work can be done in the winter, but a lot of it can't. And Prina Newhoff would really appreciate being able to start sooner rather than later. So with all of that in mind, here is what I'm going to request of the board, if it makes sense to you, that the board authorize authorize me to sign the grant agreement for the funding of this project when we get that, as is anticipated in the next few days. This is standard grant agreement from the state, just like every other grant agreement that we get. So the language of it all is boilerplate. The amount being, I had meant to look up the exact amount, but it's roughly $230,000.
Is that require any participation from the county, or is that a total grant that would be provided?
There is a 2.5% local match on that.
Which turns, how much is that then, Barry? Would you?
Around $5,000.
$5,000, okay.
And that type of match is something we budget in each year, because being able to receive 97.5% funding is certainly beneficial.
Yeah, is this something required by the feds then? Is that correct? The study?
Yes, because the state's already indicated to us that they won't issue us further grants for construction here until we get this updated. So this
Okay.
is holding up future grant funding.
That's pretty strong language, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it sure is.
Right there in the cup.
Yep.
Right.
So as I was saying, my request would be that the board basically give approval to something sight unseen, which is not the way we normally do things. And that then the board also approve the contract with Prina Newhoff pending getting the grant executed. So I don't want the board authorizing and signing and dating that contract with Prina Newhoff until we have the money lined up. But I don't want to wait another month for a regular board meeting to do all this. So that's my wish. And I'll just turn it over to you to see what your thoughts are on this.
Barry, is this a situation where we can possibly get it 100% picked up, either through the state or the feds, or are we stuck with, a 10% participation on this thing?
We are stuck with the 2.5%.
2.5%, what's that going to amount to right now? Can you give me a rough figure on that?
Around $5,000.
5,000. Right. What is this really going to do for us? It's just a requirement of the feds or the state, I guess, huh?
It's basically our basic plan. Airport layout plan is basically a document that describes your future wants and desires. And ours is well over 20 years old and well past the time is recommended that it be updated.
Okay, so this is like a plan for improvements, I guess, huh?
Correct. It's kind of the future vision of the airport from an infrastructure standpoint.
Thank you.
And subsequent grants are then paying for those pieces that the plan lays out.
I see.
Okay, one thought, a couple thoughts on this. I have no problem, asking for a motion to give Barry his wishes here, or we can go ahead and wait for Barry to get this information and then call a special meeting to give him or grant his wishes. So I don't know which way the board wants to go. I'm asking.
What's Barry's?
Well, probably the best thing, Jerry, is to have a motion authorizing Barry and or yourself, if need be, to sign the documentation pending arrival of the funding through the state aeronautics.
That's the way I'm tending towards going.
Jeff, would that include all the money then, or is that still our participation of a certain amount?
Mark, that's standard operating procedure here. When you're coming with the state, it's 2.5%, no matter what it is. That's not going to change.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we're wanting to grant Barry his wish to sign off on this when the grant comes through and so on. Now, Barry, is this going to be electronic sign off or will my
It would
signature?
be, going forward, everything with the state is electronic signature.
Okay. Well,
So
I guess,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. So what's the source going to be of this 5%? Where are we going to get that? Do we have enough in our
Mark,
account?
it's 2.5% and it's in the budget.
It's in the county budget or in?
No, it's in the airport authority budget. It's already there.
Okay. The funds are there, or they're already there?
Yes.
Correct.
Part of,
The 2.5% is already there. It's been allocated.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense then.
Good. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to allow Barry to go ahead and electronically sign off on the approval of the grant agreement for the airport layout plan. And then also, once that's been secured, to go ahead and sign off on a contract with Newhoff for the work on it.
So, Barry, do they need to be two separate motions, or is that one motion is going to cover everything?
I think probably two motions. I would keep it better that way. Go ahead, Barry.
I was gonna say I would do two, but I think one motion could do it.
I guess
Let's go on.
I'm confused as to why we would have to have anything. I mean, we have to, you have to sign off on the, state aeronautics grant. So you
Yes.
need authority to sign off on that to receive it.
Correct.
Okay, that will be my motion pending, allowing a airport manager and or chair to sign off pending receipt of the state aeronautics grant for, what is it, Barry? Help me here with this, with the,
$230,000 for the airport layout plan.
okay. That's it.
Okay,
I'll second that motion.
okay. Now, go ahead, Julia.
Ready?
Yes,
All right, Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Goodman, or Miss Goodman's gone. Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
yes,
and Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, the second motion I will put out there is to allow, after receiving state aeronautics funding, to allow the airport manager and or chair to sign off with Preen and Newhoff for contracted services for renewal of the airport plan.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I'll support that.
yes, it does. I'll support it also. Julie?
All right. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes,
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
and Mr. Dents.
Yes.
Thank you.
okay, Barry, you're all set. Anything else to add to anything, Barry?
I do
Not
not.
on the paper?
Nope.
Okay. Any other comments by authority members this afternoon before we close the meeting?
The only comment I have for you is when I did bump into Congressman Bergman a couple weeks ago, I did reinforce with him that if we have an issue with the airport for the TSA and the EAS service, we definitely be knocking on his door. The only thing I request, Barry, is please don't let it be a last second thing. If I need to be charging forward, I need to know.
Yep.
That's it for
pretty
me.
important. That's pretty important too. Yeah.
Okay. And Jeff, good luck on your campaign.
Thank you. All the support I can get. I've got a credible challenger, so hopefully everything pans out well, and I'm still in the game come November 4th.
Okay, great. Sounds great. Okay, if there's no other further comments, meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you for showing up, everyone.